So in your experience as a service manager and bringing up the Paragon Honda example, I mean, like you look at, and you talk about this a little bit in your article, like increasing your hours, adding second shifts. I mean, Paragon went to like an extreme and they're like, we're going to do 24/7 service. And I understand his reasoning behind that. Like, hey, he looked at his market and he was like, well, there's a lot of civil servants, police, fire, paramedic, like all these sorts of things that live in my area. So they can't necessarily get their vehicle to service during regular business hours because they're ending their shift at midnight or starting their shift at midnight or like whatever it is. In your experience as a service manager, if I wanted to break or advance, I was going to say break from the norm, I guess that applies, in my service department and start thinking out of the box like Brian has at Paragon, to be able to facilitate the need out there, like you're saying, like not a lot of people want to ride public transit right now.
Mm-hmm.
A vehicle quickly went from like kind of this borderline utility luxury thing to like, no, this is a utility. Like I need this thing. What would you do? What are you looking at as a service director, a service manager to go, hey, here's how we're going to bump things up to be more flexible for our customers?
Yeah. So for me, my number one objective would be how can I make sure that the customer has a pleasant experience today, and more importantly, how can I ensure that they have an amazing experience in the future? So that's how I would be looking at things. And so right now, if you think about all that we talked about right now, with you're getting more hours, right? Because you have more heavy work. And you got to create a socially distant, acceptable work environment for your people. So you're probably, spaced out in stalls and things of that nature.
Right.
There's a very good chance or likelihood that you're going to create some bottlenecks in your department. And so what's the alternative? Now you're going to tell the customers, hey, you're 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out, or do we get creative to Paragon's credit and start thinking outside of the box? Maybe I have to open extra shifts. Maybe I have to be open at night. Maybe if I don't work on the weekends, maybe the weekends need to be open. We just need to start looking at the business a little bit different, because, when you look at where we are, I don't feel that customers right now are willing to put up with a lot. Right? There's just too much stress. There's too much stuff going on in their lives. And the last thing they need is to go to a dealership to want to get their vehicle serviced and not be able to get in there for 2-3 weeks, depending on capacity, or being there and just waiting 4 or 5 hours for their car to be ready. Like I don't think that customers have the tolerance for that right now.
Do dealerships have the capacity to offer faster services than they do? And if so, what are the bottlenecks? Like, let's forget about social distance or the physical distancing. And let's just say like we're back to it. COVID's a thing of the past, or at least we understand it more. There's vaccines, there's everything. We're allowed to open full scale again. Do we have the capacity, the ability to offer faster services? Like, why have we been stuck in this? Hey, well, we can pick you up. We can pick the vehicle up and you'll see it 6 hours from now. Could it not go faster?
I think that really depends. When I was starting out, I remember one of my mentors, I used to, as a service writer, I wanted to service everybody. Right. And I wanted to get everybody in. And I'd always tell people like, hey, let's do it. I'll squeeze you in there. And my manager used to get really, really upset. And he'd be like, dude, where are you going to squeeze them in? You're going to squeeze them between two bays? Like, we don't have the space. Like, you're just upsetting the customer.
Right.
And it took me a while to kind of see that logic. But I think the main thing that a lot of dealerships suffer from is it's a lack of education, right? A lack of education when it comes to scheduling your appointment. You know what I mean? And we still accept the walk-ins, and we try to make concessions. And for the most part, I would say that's on the service advisor side, but we try to make concessions for customers when we don't really have, when we can't, right? Because we have scheduled service that's flowing through our departments, and then we got to take in all this walk-in business, and that's where things start to really kind of get out of hand.
Yeah.
There was an article I want to say it was on the Fixed Ops Journal in 2018 or last year. I don't remember exactly. I think it was a couple of years old, but it was talking about a scheduler usage. And I was very, there were shocking numbers, dude, like less than 20% of the people that go to a dealership schedule an appointment. So think about that. You start your day with over 80% walk-in business, people that don't have an appointment, that is just going to create a bunch of issues and chaos within your department. And you got to do that every single day. And so if there were ever a time, in my opinion, if there were ever a time to educate your customer base on the importance of scheduling their service, now is the time. Yeah. If as an industry, as a dealership, if you're not doing that, if you're not making that like your number one priority, I think you're doing yourself some damage, because you could now you have all the excuse in the world to set that up and set that expectation for the customer. Just like if they were going to the doctors or things like that, or the dentist, where you have to have a scheduled appointment. You don't walk to a doctor and just sit down and be like, hey, I'm here. You know what I mean? So
that's what a walk-in clinic's for, and you're going to wait for 4 hours.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, it makes total sense. It also strikes me, and I mean, this is specific to Canada right now, but I've got a headline up in front of me talking about how Walmart is shutting down its 106 tire, lube, and express car repair shops across Canada. And it's funny because we always get compared to these type of like quick, Express, the Pennzoils, the Jiffy Lubes, the Mr. Lubes, all these sorts of things. And I think that's where people think they can just get away with like walking in and hoping you can get it done in the next 15 minutes. What I also think is interesting about this is like, we've always been compared to these, bigger express type stores. And why can't we be more like them? Well, Walmart's shutting down its 106 locations. 550 jobs are going to be lost, which means a couple of things to me. It means A, there's a lot of free agents on the market. So if you're struggling to find technicians, there's 550 of them that are going to be into the market here real quick. The second thing is what you just said. I feel like I couldn't say it any better, even if I wanted to. You got to educate your customers. It's like the development world. So one of my companies, we develop software. And it's so funny because sometimes I'll go into a meeting and I'm like, it'd be cool is if our software could do this. And sure enough, I almost like clockwork. One of the developers would be like, we've been able to do that for like 3 years. I was like, why didn't you tell anybody? Where was the release notes? Where was and how does this apply to the dealership? Well, I see like this marketing thing where it's like, you can't just like mention it on a Facebook post once. Like if you're going to educate customers, like dig in, educate your customers. This is a campaign. This is campaign educate customer on service process and how to book and what to expect and who they're going to see and what does it look like and when does it work best and how can you get the best at and I'm going to be pushing this home until I'm blue in the face. And because there's always new customers coming into that market for me, that means I constantly have to be perpetually educating people. It's not just one of those things that I can be like, what do we do on our websites? Here's our service menu. But sometimes, barely, here's our service menu. It's like, book an online service. And then what happens? You fill out the form and it's like, thank you. Someone will be in touch with you shortly. And then 7 days goes by. Right, exactly. And you don't hear from anything, which for me ties back into the whole physical distance doesn't mean, social or physical distancing doesn't mean you have to be personal experience distancing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like, I think that's the next thing that we need to look at is, okay, if we have those physical restrictions, then what are we doing digitally for the service side of the business? Because we talk about sales all the time, right? All the decision makers that I ever sit down with, or all the content that I see, it's all about how can we, and I love it, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of momentum. It's like, how can we improve? How can we get more sales? How can we do this for sales? But we forget too often about service, which is crazy to me because when you look at profitability, you're keeping 70 to 80 cents per every dollar in the service department. And you know how hard it's been to make any money on the front of the house when you're selling cars.
Yeah.
And so I don't understand why we're not focusing on that department a lot more. Like, I think we have it backwards to a certain degree. Like, we should be focusing on service a lot more, and then, kind of channeling to the front of the house. But, we just don't do a lot of that within the industry.
No, you don't. And as a testament, like, just in the last year, we've purchased two new vehicles. Service and working with that dealership on service is a complete afterthought. Complete and total afterthought. And part of it is like, I think a lot of people already have their quote, and don't get mad at me, fixed ops people, but like their mechanic. I know you all want to be called technicians, but everybody still calls you mechanics. Like, let's just be honest, right? And like, I would own it. I would be the mechanic of all mechanics if that was the case. But like, you've got your guy already at some like shop, whatever. And so this ties into that education and marketing piece for me. I got to be marketing the education of why they need to deal with us. But like, honestly, like, this happened to me the other day, and I feel a little bit like, why am I even admitting this? But like, I got the email from the dealership on the most recent vehicle I purchased, and they're like, hey, don't forget your 6-month whatever. And I'm like, shut up. And like, it was like, I didn't even think about it. It's like, okay, would that be different, to your point? Like, would that be different if when they sold the vehicle, I was introduced to the service department?
Yeah, well, dude, great point. Like, think about this. So, and again, one of the conversations that I have often is, why are we focused so much on getting new customers? I don't understand. When we look at NADA numbers, I think the vehicle acquisition number is like $500 to $600 per new customer. You have a DMS, unless you're a brand new dealership, you have a database with thousands of customers. Mm-hmm. Not only do you have thousands of customers, but these are customers that have already said yes to you because they bought from you.
Yeah.
Right. And if you segment your list right, you can not only talk to those customers that bought from you, but you can talk to those customers that bought from you and continue to service in your dealership. What are the chances that you can communicate with those customers more effectively and at a lower cost if they bought the car from you and they've serviced it ever since they bought them until current?
Right.
You know what I mean? You can send them an email for free, and the open rate and consumption of that information is going to be significantly higher, and it's going to cost you nothing.
Yeah.
And so we're focused on sell, but then we miss on we sold a car. This is when the job starts. That's not the end of it. That's not where it ends. Hey, let's high five each other. We sold another car. Okay, let's go do it again. No, that's when it starts. That's when that loyalty, when that long-term relationship begins.
Yeah.
And to your point, like, why are we not introducing that customer to all the departments in our dealership and welcoming them to the family? You know what I mean?
Why do you think that? Is it because traditionally speaking, the service department is already generating more and preserving more revenue or profit than the front line? That they kind of are like, is it a comfort issue? Like, oh yeah, well, we know it's doing okay, that we're not going to invest more into it. Like, is it a comfort zone thing, or is it an ignorance thing? Like, what do you think is the barrier to putting more focus on fixed ops?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. But, I could answer, I'm going to attempt to answer it, but it's going to sound like a generalization. Let me just preface. Sure. I know that there's a lot of dealers out there that do it well.
Right.
But there's a lot of dealers that don't, that they're just, they work as silos. I had somebody on my podcast one time that talked about independent islands, right? So it's like independent islands, and you only go to that other island when it's on fire. Right? That's the only time. For the rest of the time, if your island is good and there's no issues, you stay there.
Right.
And so we're not bridging those gaps. And if we did, I think that we would, we as far as selling cars, it would be, we'd have a better operation. To me, I've always said that the service department is the long-term success strategy for your dealership. Because if you can get that customer there and you can build that loyalty, and that customer is coming to you beyond 2 years after owning that vehicle, which is when the warranties typically from the manufacturer typically expire, dude, you got that customer for life. And what's going to happen when that customer needs another car, or his son needs a car, or their daughter, or their friend, or their, like, it's just going to feed so much business to the operation. That, it's going to be an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
So
it's one of those funny things, right? Like if I'm a sales guy, it's my bias is towards sales. So I go, oh, well, you see, but it's the sales that are going to fuel more customers into service. And then if I'm a service guy, or if I'm a fixed ops guy, I'm like, well, no, like my bias leans towards fixed. And so it's always interesting seeing the two different sides of this. But you're right. And I agree with you. The way I see this is that the fixed ops and service department has a greater ability to serve more at a greater scale and for a longer term than the once every 3 to 5 years that somebody purchases a vehicle. And I can use my fixed ops department as a way to leverage the relationship for a longer period of time and keep those customers loyal, to keep them referring, to demonstrate hospitality. Then I can once every 3 to 5 years that I get that chance from the sales department.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you made a good point. Like, you're right. There is that us versus them sort of a deal for the most part. And we got to start looking at as us together, because the service department does need you to sell cars in the front of the house, because that's going to drive business, no question. And so it goes, right? So the circle goes, but that needs to be a kind of a cohesive type of a relationship, because, it all funnels, man, right? It's all part of the business. You're one unit. The goal should be not just to sell the car, but let's sell the car. Let's service that customer. Let's build that loyalty, and everybody in the dealership is going to benefit from that, that sort of a system, if you will.
Yeah, totally. Love it, man. Hey, so there's those listening and they're like, yeah, this makes total sense to me. I need to do something. From your vantage point and experience, what is something that they need to focus on today in order to start making these strides forward in fixed ops?
Number one thing for me right now is communication. That's the number one thing. And you have to, you just have to educate your customers. You have to communicate with your customers about what is happening at the dealership. You got to let them know. If let's say that you're a dealership that's at capacity and you have a bunch of walk-ins, that's not going to work, man. You have to communicate. Let your customers know. Go on to the social media platforms and tell customers, like, you need to make an appointment right now. Here's how you do it, and create a tutorial on how they can go online to set up an appointment. If they're not comfortable digitally, give them an option to set up an appointment by calling the dealership. If whatever you're doing, if you're picking up, if you're dropping off, if you have hands-free services, whatever it is that you're doing right now, you have to communicate that. Do you know that a lot of the stores that I've worked with, one of the things that they tell me often is that customers will say comments like, "Oh, we didn't even know you guys were open." That's the kind of stuff that we need to, that cannot happen. I mean, we just can't, what? Yeah. Like, that just says that we're not doing anything to educate our community, to educate our customers. That's it. It's like,
the wacky waving inflatable flailing arm tube man outside isn't enough. You got to go deeper. You got to go deeper.